Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and there's a pretty inconvenient truth as the title would suggest, and that truth is that technology that we all love to hate or love, AI, ain't going anywhere. Now why am I making a video on this one specifically today, ladies and gentlemen? Well, this is kind of in my wheelhouse. You know I love me emulation, and recently a lot of cool things have been happening with emulators, where instead of emulating a video game, we now have projects like Mario Kart Wii compiled, where people are taking Mario Kart Wii, which is actually the only Mario Kart game that I played really extensively back in the day, and they've ported it over to computer, meaning that if you have a computer, if you have a Macintosh, if you have a Linux computer, if you have basically any device capable of executing code, you can basically run this game natively on that device. How does a decompilation work? Well, if you look at other videos that I've made, like about a year ago, I made a video about Sonic Unleashed and how, you could play that thing decompiled on your computer. Meaning that, again, you didn't need an Xbox 360 or a PlayStation 3 or any system. You could just run Sonic Unleashed on your computer. People went through the painstaking hassle of basically writing the game from scratch, reversing the game's, understanding, writing it all again to basically execute it everywhere, right? Effectively, at the end of the day, you now have a copy of the game that you have the actual source code to. Meaning that if you're down the list of modding games, for instance, well, guess what? It's even easier to mod things that you have like the source code stuff too. No more fucking with emulators and writing crazy patches. So what's the drama today? Well, when I saw this Mario Kart Wii compiled, I was like, damn, it's got like 9 million views. You know, people are probably like, hell yeah, I can't wait to play Mario Kart Wii compiled. And of course, as you can see, they had online play, so you can play with the boys over Discord. And they even have 200-ass tracks. So I was like, what's the issue? What's the drama? There's gotta be a catch. It's not this many people excited for Mario Kart Wii. And the reality of it is, of course, they were not. Simply because this sparked one of the most insane debates imaginable. Will Allah let you into Jannat, heaven, if you, God forbid, used AI to code your game? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you had people going, Nintendo can't wait to sue the fucking hell out of you. Unless they're stealing code from Nintendo, or unless they're distributing their assets, I don't think that's exactly going to happen. So for one example, one of the discussion points was when they looked into their FAQ and they were like, was AI used in development? And they're like, yeah, for coding, no AI art or assets were generated. So again, ultimately, obviously down the road, there were a bunch of people going, was AI used in development? Yes, for code only. And they posted the Squidward crash out. I played the 25 seconds here, but YouTube's got copyright on a vice grip. So if I even showed Squidward's nose for a second, I think the system would freak out. And of course, there was a lot of individuals who were like, hey man, I'm kind of excited for it. I'm ready. Which is kind of me. I'm excited to play a recompilation of one of my favorite sort of racing games. So you got people going, it's insane the hate towards AI that people have. I get the thing about generative AI, but the project has used AI to make code and be able to have a port of the Wii Mario Kart. Now again, let's just not split hairs here. Generative artificial intelligence isn't just going to fucking Google Gemini telling it, hey, make me Mario and Princess Peach. You know, just make an image of them, right? Make some copyright busting image. No, I would say code, in a way, is also generative artificial intelligence, all right? Let's not split hairs and pretend here. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, no matter who you go to, there's a lot of content creators I watch on the internet. People like the Primogen, for instance, who has covered a lot of artificial intelligence, just coding-related things. You also have people like Theo, who talks a lot about artificial intelligence, and people like PewDiePie, who've built projects like Odysseus through the use of artificial intelligence and have them shipped to GitHub. Projects that I've looked at on my channel. So the reality of what's been going on over here is obviously there's been this sort of moral panic as to, is this okay? Now, obviously, at the end of the day, look, I'm one of those people where I don't really care for AI slop. on like the timelines. I don't really like watching videos that are AI written. If I hear like AI generated voiceovers, then it's very easy for me to like identify this simply because this is the business I'm in. This is something that once you get an ear for it, you'll just keep it forever. And that immediately like turns me off completely. But honestly, as somebody that is not a fan of like these big artificial intelligence companies, and that's mostly because of the privacy aspect of it, that's mostly because I don't think that companies should basically be harvesting all of this compute, basically be raising the prices for every single thing around us, especially when it comes to buying a stick of RAM, when it comes to buying the next GPU that you want, basically get to dictate who is buying the stuff, who isn't. I don't really appreciate companies that sell this stuff back to us after harvesting all our information for premium dollars. I don't really care for it. But if you've ever watched my channel recently, or if you ever know me as like, if you ever know the content that I make, I am not somebody that shuns myself away from like technology. I don't think artificial intelligence is like this evil tech that should be completely destroyed away. It's a technology that it exists. It's here. It's here for people to use, even if you don't consume it. The fact that two of the biggest countries in the world, the United States and the Chinese, invest billions of dollars into this technology, trying to outpace one another constantly. Remember, this is like the new space race for these people. Shows you that this technology will not go away. And one of the things that kind of legitimizes, I think arguably the only good use case of anything AI related is probably its ability to help people that are coding. Now, let's talk about decompilations for a minute. Screw like Mario Kart for a minute, right? To give you kind of an idea of what a decompilation can do, imagine you're playing something like Metal Gear Solid, right, on the original PlayStation. Now, you might be like, shit, I want to reverse engineer this game. I want to recompile it. And there's a lot of reasons why you would want to recompile something like Metal Gear Solid 1. Maybe you want to add extra graphical effects to it. Maybe you want to, make it play at a higher base frame rate. There's a lot of reasons. So how do you recompile something? Think about it like this. You are basically taking a game, a program that works on the PlayStation 1, and you're trying to rewrite it in whatever language to make it compile on almost every other device. So imagine, for instance, right, you take this game and you're like, I'm going to rewrite this in like Rust or C++ or whatever the fuck, and you look at this game and now you have to identify how the 3D engine works. You have to identify like how the game saves and loads a file. For instance, even something like, hey, Snake has multiple firearms. So now I have to imagine, how does Snake switch firearms, right? What makes it? What is the code that allows Snake inside the game to be able to hold the L2 button or R2 button, open up a menu, and swap through items? How do we make sure those items are in his inventory at the time? How do we make sure each of those items works individually? Because every gun in that game tends to have its own like things. And so when you start thinking of all these ideas, right, these are things you're going to have to think of in order to recreate the game or any program that you're recompiling, right? And of course, at the end of the day, there's a whole vast array of other things too that you have to constantly keep into your head. Recompilations are some of the, I would say, most insane projects that I've ever actually seen. I think next to emulators, it might be one of the things that like interests me probably the most. Like I love a good recompilation story, right? But the reality of it is it's not easy and it's filled with really fucking tedious work. And of course, ultimately, at the end of the day, when it came to Mario Kart Recompiled, a lot of people were looking at this and it went beyond just the names of, hey, listen, how much AI are these people fucking using, right? There's been a lot of people who've come out and going, listen, as a guy that writes software, I have no problem using AI to write code and documentation. I've got a problem with using AI for anything art related. Now, there's also been people in this camp who are like, listen, man, I think art, I think writing code is art too. And I would kind of agree, like, unless you're writing something like Grand Theft Auto like 5, and you get that, something like that running on a PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 with that level of like optimization and efficiency, I think in a lot of ways that shit is pretty goddamn artistic. But even at the highest level, for instance, the other day, Linus Torvalds, you may know this guy as the maintainer of Linux, the Linux kernel, the actual beating heart of the operating system that I use, and I really do push onto the people watching, right? If you haven't switched to Linux, considered switching, especially if you're annoyed with like fucking Windows and all of its crap. But anyways, Linus the other day was kind of talking about AI a little bit. And Linus a year ago, when it came to AI, I think was somebody that wasn't sold on it. And this is something that he even wrote about AI shit. He's like, yes and no. When somebody was like, I think it makes the point. If the point is to not use LLMs in general, let's discuss this, not how to make each use case more complex. So he's like, first off, that's not the position of the Linux kernel. I realize that some people really dislike AI, but this is an area where I'm willing to absolutely put my foot down as a top-level maintainer. Linux is not one of those anti-AI projects. And if someone has issues with that, they can do the open source thing and just fork it. Forking basically means if you don't agree with what Linus is doing, you take today, go to the actual Git project and just fork it, right? So you literally can just make an account, go to his like Linux Linux like Git right here and just fork it on your own and just make your own fucking Linux kernel with your own like non-AI attributed things. That's the beauty of open source, right? So ultimately, he goes and says AI is a tool just like any other tool that we use, and it's clearly a useful one. It may no longer have been that clearly a year ago, but it's no longer in question today. There are other questions around AI, right? Like what the economy will actually look. But is it useful is no longer one of those questions. Anybody who doubts that clearly hasn't actually used it. Yes, it can also be a painful tool both for maintainers and just from a it keeps finding embarrassing bugs standpoint. So what he's basically saying is, okay, don't just flood my shit with AI slop, right? Otherwise, you become fucking Microsoft where everything is written through Copilot. AI writes code, and that code can be a hodgepodge of good shit or bad shit, right? Like I've talked to people that actually write software for a living, and for the most part, I would say when prompted correctly, it spits out good code. It spits out code that you look through and you realize, okay, this is usable. Or if you find the issues, because ultimately you should always read the fucking code that these things spit out, you look at it and think, okay, that's a mistake, that's a mistake, that's a mistake, that's a severe mistake. So then you go back to the drawing board, you either fix that shit yourself because you're a good programmer, or you go and write another prompt and say, okay, there's 4 issues, fix it like this, like this, like this, accordingly. And the artificial intelligence will look at your prompt and go, oh my god, you're fucking right, hold on, let me snort my digital cocaine. Did I say snort? Jesus. And go right back to the actual like grind. And then it writes the cleaner code. That's kind of an example of the only good use case for this. And I'll give you one example of writing code, for instance, too. Back before the AI days, there was a website called Stack Overflow. And you might be like, whoa, this is triggering some memories. So back in the day, if you needed any help, you would go to this website, you would ask a question, and somebody on this entire site would answer your question. They would give you proper code. And then you would take code like that, for instance, and just copy it back in to your project. Obviously, you'd retool it to make it work in your project, clearly, but that's just kind of how it is, right? And so any problem that you would have had, around 24 million fucking questions have been asked so far on the site, you could probably find an answer somewhere here. But you want to know what the activity of a site like this looks like now? If you actually go to the graph right here, you can see that Stack Overflow in 2014 reached a peak. Now it's actually straight up flatlined. It's doing worse than it was doing around 2010 to 2012. Why did this site flatline? It's because a vast majority of people that write software code for a living, people that do this as their job, are using the LLMs, right? So when you use something like an LLM, for instance, right? And I'll show you a quick example. I'll fire one up as we're doing this video. Now, obviously, as you all know, I use local LLMs. So I'm going to spin one up really quickly on my local computer right now. And you can see that I'm firing it up. Just got to make sure my actual, just got to make sure my screen recording doesn't die. Now, this is fired up locally on my system. You can see that it has a local IP address. So now, if I decide to, open up a terminal over here, and for instance, I go to my desktop, let me just go to a directory, and I'm going to open up something called OpenCode, for instance, right? I'm going to ask OpenCode, right? Write me a single file website, HTML file that tracks the position of my mouse the page should render a color square, a square color block that moves with the mouse and has a trailing effect. So here in this situation, what I'm doing over here is I'm getting the artificial intelligence to write me a quick little page, right? So effectively, I'm prompting it for you. And of course, you can see that, again, locally. This is a Claude installation, also running locally. So you can see right now, things are kind of spinning up over here. The GPU is kind of moving, and it's already starting to write sort of a plan. This plan will then be implemented into a full file. And that full file, you can read the code of, you can modify it as you need to. And the reality of it is that this is kind of the future, right? Like, gone are the days of writing hundreds of lines yourself. Now are the days of prompting and reiterating and retooling. And so going back to the Mario Kart example, obviously people who don't really understand every intricacies of how to recompile a game, now they have the ability to, with assistance of coding tools and LLMs, achieve the effect. What I'm doing over here in this entire example is, instead of going online and asking somebody to figure out, or like reading the code online, as most people would try to, or do, this is just basically taking its corpus of training data and regurgitating that information out. It's still up to me to understand if what it presents is still usable information, if that makes sense. So look, at the end of the day, this is a local model, right? The local model is nowhere near as good as the shit you're gonna get at the big boys. So the Fables, the fucking ChatGPTs, those have gotten to a point where I think ultimately, the end of the day, like, AIs like that are probably a lot better than I would say most people fucking writing code. And most people that write code will probably admit that the AIs have gotten dramatically good in the last, I would say, year or two even, right? So again, ultimately, the end of the day, I really think that the big thing about artificial intelligence stuff is that, for me, I've always talked about like the AI bubble and like how it has to be like crashing or deflating. And a lot of that also comes down to the fact that, listen, this technology is incredibly expensive. For instance, going to something like Fable 5, right? You have to go over here, and within a few individuals that sell this stuff, you're buying this at like $50 per million output tokens, right? Like, the actual costs of artificial intelligence have gotten to a point where, unless you're made of money, okay, paying for this kind of stuff is not in everybody's price range. Now, the only thing I think that can actually like hurt the AI bubble and actually like pop it down to a normal point where things start coming back to normalcy is when you have companies like, Moonshot right over in China that release things like Kimi K3 that are really good, and they're substantially cheaper. Obviously, they do produce more tokens, so things vary, but this is substantially cheaper than the Fable 5 example that I showed you. And because it's open source, right now it just launched, but over time, when people download these models and run them on million-dollar data centers, you'll start to get more and more providers that start competing and bringing this price overall down. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the technology is not going anywhere. It's just a matter of when the prices start reaching that normal point versus the premium shit that we pay right now. And without like blowing your mind away, there is in fact even a black market for artificial intelligence shit too, where yes, on places like this, a bunch of Chinese kids have found ways to sell you artificial intelligence from places like Anthropic, that same Fable 5 I showed you, for, cheaper values. I don't know how they do this. I haven't really looked much into that, but it's just crazy that there exists a black market for AI. And all of this stuff really does tool into the only use case for artificial intelligence, which is really coding, right? Coding is one of those things where, listen, I don't care so much about AI writing stories or quests in video games or voicing people or generating images and worlds. That's always dog shit. At least in most cases, right? There might be that one AI art or something that gets hung up in the fucking Louvre. But the reality here is that coding is one of those things where, as much as you hate artificial intelligence, right? I think the vast majority of people that actually do write code have kind of pretty much normalized this one fact. And that's, code is going to be around forever. And that ultimately, at the end of the day, the future is, unless you're using AI to code your projects, I think you're just leaving efficiency at the table, right? And that's the thing about a lot of these recompilation projects, right? I think a lot of people that are kind of, I don't want to say performatively hating artificial intelligence, like it's a very emotional topic for a lot of people because there's a lot of negatives associated with this technology. And in some ways, you could say there's far more negatives with AI and data centers right now, at least people are seeing in their immediate, than the long term benefits that are supposed to be promised to us down the road. But the thing is, for a lot of people that are making free compilation projects like Mario Kart Recompiled, I think at the end of the day, these people don't really deserve our anger and vitriol. I think at the end of the day, the project that I was seeing, Mario Kart Recompiled, is made by a passionate group of people that really enjoy Mario Kart. And they want to bring it for a vast majority of people to play. It's a dead game, and they're reviving it for people, who are wanting to play this stuff on their Steam Deck, in a much more optimized fashion. There are people that want to play this on their PC with like ultra wide, proper online, everything. And I think for people that are doing this ultimately for free, right? Because at the end of the day, the guy who's making this, Patchy on YouTube, isn't doing this in a paid for manner. He is doing this for free. He doesn't make a lot of money or if really anything on YouTube. This is a person that is passionate, and not everyone in the world knows how to fucking recompile a video game, right? Not everyone's a cracked programmer. And I think for those people that are using this kind of stuff to assist them in the programming side of it, or at least cut down on the monotony and let them focus on more of the intricate and more of the fun stuff, I think that's okay. And unfortunately, the truth is, look, as much as you might hate this reality, the future of this world, or at least coding in general, is through AI stuff. That's pretty much what it comes down to. And in the process, you can see that like mouse tracker that I built, it literally actually did build the actual like process. So instead of wasting the GPU resources, I'm just going to go and make this myself to see if this project actually works properly. Oh, look at that. It does have a trailing effect. And the trailing effect does in fact decay. It's not perfect. And it's definitely something that can be fixed down later. But you can see that again when it comes to artificial intelligence stuff. Yes, it can spit out really, really simple things. And ultimately, you can use this tool to build upon even something as simple as this website and whatnot down the road. But ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.